the question of the pupil. You have spoken of a link between Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, and then strangely enough Darwin in terms of evolution, and the writer Richard Dawkins. And if I understand you correctly, what you have said is that we can take Ouspensky's writings coming in effect from Gurdjieff, and we can disprove entirely the theories of evolution. And this impacts considerably upon the writings of Richard Dawkins. Could you explain what this is all about? It seems a very strange connection to us. What does all this mean? The teacher replies, "You are speaking about areas that are very daunting because they challenge our established views of the world. And this is always very difficult to introduce or to produce. Ouspensky claims man is a machine. Man is a machine entirely controlled by external forces. I'm not sure what the second half of that statement contributes. But man is a machine. Now, of course, it's not true. And the question you have asked concerns these ideas. There are many, many proofs, scientific theories that show that this is not true. Man is not a machine. Organic life in general obeys completely different laws, scientific laws, to machines and mechanical devices. So what did Gurdjieff actually say to Ouspensky? That Ouspensky would say, man is a machine. An untrue statement. Gurdjieff, I suggest to you, said the following, and we have to first of all define what a machine is. This is my definition of it. I don't think it's been challenged yet, and I think it covers the ground that it's supposed to cover. It would be difficult to challenge this definition of a machine. A machine is a complex device made by man in order to perform a specific function or functions, and it always has an operator. So we can take a variety of machines and they all conform to this definition. If you have your hedge is overgrown, you have a hedge cutter. It's a machine, it's a device made by man to perform a specific function or functions. It's going to cut your hedge, and it always has an operator. You have to use it, or you have to get your gardener to use it to cut the hedge. So it's a machine. If you have your motor car, it is a complex device made by man in order to perform a specific function or functions. And it always has an operator. You have to drive your machine. I know there are machines now, cars now, that are supposedly driverless, but they have to be programmed and they have to be monitored and they have to be looked after. Even an automaton has to be looked after by someone else. Now, the machine always has an operator. So I think what Gurdjieff was saying to Ouspensky, and this conforms to what Gurdjieff's overall teaching, of course, what Gurdjieff said to Ouspensky is that we're going to look at man, the machine, not man, the operator of the machine. A machine is a complex device made by man in order to perform a specific function or functions, and it always has an operator. So what Gurdjieff was saying, man, the machine, we're looking at the machine. And Gurdjieff's teaching is that there is a problem with the machine, not with the operator of the machine. The operator of the machine has an abnormal psychology, true, but that's because the machine is not working properly. So the operator of the machine has to adapt to the fact that the machine is not working properly. This is what Gurdjieff was saying to Ouspensky. We're talking about man, the machine is not working properly, it does not have the energies necessary to perform the specific function or functions that it should perform, that it is designed or made to perform. And so we have to adapt to that. The operator of the machine has to adapt to that, and we have an abnormal psychology. But what Gurdjieff is saying is we're going to look at the machine because that is the cause of the abnormal psychology. It's no good looking at psychology or studying psychology or trying to change our psychology, because our psychology is a consequence of a cause. And what is the cause? The cause is the machine does not work as it should. And Gurdjieff gives the reasons why this happens. He says there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. We don't perceive as we should. We don't receive the food, a food of impressions, the energies coming from our perception, the food of impressions. We don't receive this food as we should. And so energetically we fall to a very low level. This is the machine. And in consequence of this, we fall into structures, psychological or internal structures, the machine, from which we can't emerge. We don't have the energies to escape from these structures. As a consequence of this, we have an abnormal psychology. So the idea of a machine is quite a complex idea as used by Gurdjieff, but it boils down to a simple fact, a simple division. We are studying, in Gurdjieff's teaching, the machine, not the operator of the machine. We're not studying psychology, because our psychology is a consequence of the fact that the machine doesn't work as it should. It's designed to work in a certain way. It doesn't work that way. We have to adapt to this situation. And that's Gurdjieff's teaching. Now, your question is then asking a more complex question. How does that impact upon our ideas of evolution? So this is not Gurdjieff's teaching. This is one of the, shall we say, theoretical consequences of Gurdjieff's teaching and of Ouspensky's interpretation of it. So how does this impact, say, Richard Dawkins and his ideas about evolution? So let me say a few words about this now. There are many laws distinguishing man from a machine, scientific laws, rational laws, logical arguments to distinguish man from a machine, to show that these are completely different things. And although there are many, I'll talk here about 5 of them, which essentially deal with the difference between a machine and organic life, any element of organic life. And these are scientific laws. I call them Reed Shaw's rebuttals. My name is Reed Shaw, and these are the 5 laws which I see as a rebuttal of Darwin's theories of evolution, and in particular I suspect the writings of the ideas of Mr. Richard Dawkins. And there are 5, it's rather like your hand. There are 4 basic ones, and then there is the thumb, the 5th, which I think is the one that destroys our ideas of Darwinian evolution. So if I just use these 5, as I say, scientific laws, Readshaw's rebuttals. The first is quite simple, because if you have a machine, you can switch the machine off. And then at an indeterminate time in the future, you can switch it back on again and it will work as it did before you switched it off. So you can stop a machine, you just switch it off and then switch it on and it works again. You can't do this with any sort of living organism, you can't do this with organic life. So that's the first. I'll just express them in a simple way. The second is that a machine is made. It is manufactured. There's a process of fabrication. It's put together. So we can stop a machine, the first law, and then we can take it to bits again. So we can take, for example, your motor car and gradually take it to bits and lay out all the pieces in front of us, labelled, we know where they come from, and we take the machine completely to bits. And then, because we've labelled all these things and recorded what we've done, we can reassemble the machine, the motor car. And once it's reassembled, we can put the key into the ignition, and if we've reassembled it correctly, turn the key and the car will go, the machine will start. So you can take a machine to bits. It is made by man. You can't do this with organic life, any aspect of organic life. You can't take it to bits, put it back together again and expect it to live again, to work again. It doesn't do it. So this is the second law. If we take the third law, a machine is made. But if we look at organic life, including human beings, organic life, all organic life comes from a seed or an egg. It's not made, it's not manufactured. It comes from a seed or an egg. And this leads us into the fourth law, fourth of Readshaw's rebuttals, and that is organic life grows. It starts from a seed or an egg and it grows. Now growth is not just getting bigger, it is complete change of form, change of structure. And we know this from our kindergarten days when we study the frog and the tadpole. And the tadpole has gills and a tail and swims in the water, whereas a frog has legs, doesn't have a tail, doesn't have gills, doesn't live in water. Complete change of form, change of structure. And we have the same thing in kindergarten where we study the butterfly, which starts as a caterpillar, an egg, a caterpillar, becomes a pupae, and emerges as a butterfly. Complete and utter change of form and structure. Now your machine that you have made, a machine is a complex device made by man, the machine that you have made is not going to change its form, change its structure. Your computer does not change its model. Your car does not upgrade itself to become a Mercedes. So there are 4 laws. First, a machine, we can stop a machine and then start it again and it will work as it did previously. You can't do this with organic life. Secondly, you can take a machine to bits and reassemble it. You can't do this with organic life. These are fundamental laws. Third, all organic life originates as a seed or an egg. And fourth, it grows and a machine does not grow. These are 4 basic, obvious, scientific laws differentiating machines from organic life as we know it, as we understand it. Now, the 5th, the thumb in these Readshaw rebuttals, is this, that it's a little bit more subtle, and some areas of it you might debate. But essentially, in this context, I want to bring in Richard Dawkins, because he's quite important in this because of his errors, the absurd ideas that he is trying to convey. And this error that Richard Dawkins speaks about, he speaks of evolution as a process of a development by natural selection. This is Darwinism. A process from a primeval state to a state of complex design. As if this is what evolution is, going from essentially a simple state to a complex state. Now, of course, natural selection is a contradiction to this, because selection is always a process of going from a complex state to a simple state. So how it is understood that evolution by natural selection is a process from a primeval state to a complex state, whereas selection, natural selection, is going to be a process from a complex state to a simpler state, I don't know. I'll have to research this and perhaps try to read one of Richard Dawkins' books. That would be a good start, wouldn't it? But it's very difficult to do so because of the absurdities in them. Now, my point in bringing this forward is to say that actually this complex state in itself does not exist. And secondly, this idea of evolution from a primeval state to a complex state is not what evolution is about. I think most people would agree that evolution consists of a number of questions. And one of the questions is, how is it possible that living things, living organisms, can emerge from a primeval state which we regard as not living? And I exclude here absurdities such as Eastern philosophies that attribute spirituality to a stone. There is a spirit in the stone, for example, at one extreme. The other extreme is Richard Dawkins himself, and in the introduction to The Blind Watchmaker, one of his books, he speaks of, for example, he's going to treat the products of human beings, living organisms, as if they themselves are living organisms. So what he says, and I think it's quite explicit, he's saying that he's going to treat an aeroplane, for example, as if it is a living organism. Well, this is absurd, isn't it? Now, looking at that picture, we get the fifth, the thumb, because the complex state that Richard Dawkins is talking about only exists because there are living organisms. And we know this because once a living organism dies, it immediately, or almost immediately, reverts back to a primeval state. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes. So we can say that if we examine this complex state that Richard Dawkins will speak about as the results of evolution, this does not exist in itself. It does not exist. It exists only because there is life. If the life goes, it reverts immediately, or almost immediately, decays back to a primeval state. So it doesn't exist unless there is life. And this is the fifth law, that a living organism, when the life goes from that living organism, it reverts almost immediately back to a primeval state. Whereas a machine does not. You can leave a machine switched off, dead, in inverted commas, in a sense, for as long as you like. It will decay, of course, gradually. But I think we can all accept that that decay is quite different from the decay that takes place when a living organism dies. When a living organism dies, it's very quick, it reverts back to a primeval state. The structure, the complexity of that living organism, the minute life goes from it, goes as well, and it reverts back to a primeval state. Whereas a machine, the structure, the complexity of it, when it's not being used, when it is dead in inverted commas, or when it is redundant, it does not change. It does not revert back to a primeval state. So it's slightly more subtle. This is a thumb of Readshaw's rebuttals. It is slightly more complex, but essentially, to put it into to common parlance, there was this idea, I think, when Darwin proposed this theory of evolution, that we evolved from monkeys. That there were monkeys and then human beings. But my point is, when we die, when a living organism dies, it doesn't revert back to a previous stage in this supposed complex design. When human beings die, we don't revert to being monkeys. We revert, physically at least, to a primeval state. When the life goes, the structure, the complete structure goes. It doesn't revert back to a previous evolutionary state in this supposed complex design that Richard Dawkins talks about. So if you can perhaps see what I mean by this, and perhaps think about this a little bit yourself and come up with some questions about this. So I think there are 5 scientific laws that show, in this instance, that organic life and machines are completely different. And since human beings and man is a part of organic life and obeys all the laws that we can associate with organic life, equally, man is not a machine. And I think equally we can say that the ideas of evolution, this development from a primeval state to a complex state, is just not correct. It doesn't exist. This complex state doesn't exist independently. It doesn't exist independently of what we would label as life, because the minute life goes from this complex state, it reverts immediately back to a primeval state. It's gone. It doesn't exist. And I think that's quite a startling realization when you fully take it in.